Welcome everybody. My name is Paul Jansen from Turner Hopkins Services, or Turner Hopkins Immigration, the immigration division within Turner Hopkins. And I'm hoping to present a reasonably short, brief overview as to the New Zealand immigration process with a focus really on the skilled migrant category, which is the backbone of our visa system in New Zealand. And this seminar applies to those looking to make the move to New Zealand. So if you're offshore and you haven't got here yet, but you are thinking about making the move, but it's also very relevant though for those who are in New Zealand already and looking to stay permanently. And look, let's face it, the last few years have been pretty confusing when it comes to the visa process. And there are potentially more changes to come as we hopefully today welcome in a new government. So what we're going to talk through today is the current rules, how they look and how they will operate today. And we will be updating this video presentation in the future as well. So it's a very interesting landscape, lots of change, and certainly as an advisor over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been a real challenge to keep up with the policy, with the rules, and with the changes that have been rolled out. But fundamentally, and I think this is pretty much consistent across time for immigration in New Zealand, we've really always had a focus on a couple of things, and that's bringing in really good quality skilled migrants, which is judged and tested really in theory by how employable you are. And we've done that through lots of different ways and lots of different mechanisms, but at the heart of it all, it's kind of always stayed the same. Our migration system, for the most part, is a test of how employable you are and how those skills will match what the economy and what the country needs at the time. So before we dive into the kind of mechanics of the skilled migrant category, just a little bit of an overview, and it's really important to understand that our visa system operates in 2 parts. We have a temporary visa system, which includes things like visitors, people coming to holiday here, students, people coming to study here as an international fee-paying student, and of course, those looking to come and work here. And so that's the temporary visa side. And a temporary visa is fixed time, it's finite in nature, doesn't last forever, and potentially has to be renewed at some point. And obviously, most people, or a great deal of people who embark on this process are really looking to get to the residence side of that equation, which is to be able to live, work, and study here permanently. How these 2 things fit together, though, is a bit of a mystery. So not all temporary visas lead to residence, but residence does often rely on having a temporary visa of some description. And we'll find out a little bit more about that when we talk about the individual residence processes. So another important factor, I guess, is that those 2 systems are largely separate. So a temporary visa has its own set of rules for each category, and then residence has its own set of rules. And in both of those circles on the screen, you have different categories within each visa. Now I'm just going to stop my video for a second so you can see the full screen there. But essentially there are different visa categories or subtypes within those 2 streams. So in the residence space, and we've talked a little bit about the temporary visas, but in the residence space, we have categories for those who want to invest or maybe run a business here. We have categories for those who are looking to come in as skilled migrants and work here. And then we have categories for family as well. So if we break those family and business visas down a bit and maybe just spend a few minutes on those before we get to the nuts and bolts of the skilled pathways. Within the family stream, we have categories for parents. In fact, we have 2. So if you were coming here as a skilled migrant and you were thinking about what do you do long term to bring mum and dad, or just mum or just dad, or dad and dad, or mum and mum, whatever the makeup is, there are pathways to do that, and there are 2 essentially. So the first one is a ballot-driven system, where if you have been a resident in New Zealand for 3 years and you want to sponsor your parents or parent in, you can do so, provided you meet a certain income threshold. Now that income can be met by yourself and your partner, or yourself and a sibling. So you might have a sibling who's also resident in New Zealand and able to contribute to the total income required. Tricky thing with that ballot system is that it is a bit of a lottery. So parents go into a pool. Immigration can only select a certain number of parents from that pool every 3 months to an annual quota. And so if you don't meet the first draw, you might end up in the second, third, fourth, fifth, and so forth. The EOI remains in the pool for a period of 2 years, so it's a fair bit of time, but you have no real certainty as to when the parent application might be selected. Once you are selected, you then apply formally, and processing times are hard to judge at the moment. We don't really know exactly how long they will take, but predict for about 3 to 6 months, maybe a little longer. So on top of that, we also have a parent retirement category. So if parents have a bit of money to bring with them, $1 million, which isn't a bit of money, it's a lot of money, but if they have $1 million to invest here for 4 years, an additional $500,000 in settlement money, settlement funds, and an annual income equivalent to $60,000, it can come from a pension or investment income, they can effectively apply a lot quicker, so they can skip the ballot system. They don't have to do that. They can apply directly, although processing times for these applications are in the region of 18 to 24 months, so they do take a bit of time. Money is invested here for 4 years, and then at the end of that 4-year process, their residence becomes unconditional. So it's a bit of a quicker way. You don't have to have been here as a sponsor for 3 years before your parents come in. And so it's another avenue, but of course, with the investment required, it may not be suitable for everybody. Then we have a partnership category for if you have a partner and you're coming into New Zealand as and the partner of a New Zealand resident or citizen, you can apply based on the fact that hopefully you have lived with your partner for 12 months. Now, you might not have lived with your partner for 12 months yet, and so there are temporary visa options to bridge the gap. But partnership for residents requires you to have lived together for 1 year. Really important, we recognise all forms of partnership, whether it's civil union, de facto, same-sex, all manner, as long as you have and meet that living together requirement. And of course, the relationship must be genuine and stable. Often seen as sort of an easy category to apply for, but in reality, quite difficult because immigration does put a lot of emphasis and weight on the evidence you provide of your living together period. So you have to be really clever in terms of the documents you put forward. Then if we look at the business side of things, we have 2 pathways there. We have an investor category, which requires it actually requires a $15 million investment, but you get particular weightings for what you invest in. So as an example, for every dollar you invest in a direct investment, which has a higher risk attached to it, that is equivalent to $3 towards your total score. So if you invested $5 million in direct investments, that would be equivalent to a $15 million investment as far as immigration is concerned. If you want to mix it up and invest in things that aren't quite so high risk, then you have to increase the amount you're investing. So instead of 5, it might be 7.5 or 10 and so forth. Investments held for a 4-year time frame. It's a reasonably new policy. It's been in existence for about a year. It has not gathered as much participation as the government would have liked, and I suspect that this particular category will be up for review fairly shortly. These things do have a habit of being tested, and if they work, great. If they don't, they get rolled back or changed. So with this one not really generating a lot of interest, I suspect we might see a reduction in the investment amount, or probably more importantly, the investment vehicle, so what you're investing in. The other category we have is for those not looking to invest specifically, but looking to start a business or purchase a business, and that's the entrepreneur category. It's a particularly difficult category to apply under. It has 2 stages. There's the initial work visa stage to come and run your business, whatever business you may have proposed as part of your application. And then after doing that for 2 years, you can apply for residence. Now, it's difficult because immigration has a very high threshold as to what they consider to be a beneficial or successful business under that pathway. You also have to tick all the boxes in the business plan you present. So if you said you're going to do X, Y, Z, and you haven't done those three things during the 2 years, your residence application can fail. I'm not a big fan of the category, to be fair. I do assist people with it, but I don't advocate for it. And if I can find someone a pathway to New Zealand that does not involve that category, then I go with that pathway. So that's a kind of brief outline of family and business. We also have other specific categories within this, the family and business visa stream, but I haven't listed them all here. So these are the main ones that we usually talk through. Now we really get to the, I guess, the meat and potatoes of it all, the skilled residence pathways. And there are, in many ways, you can break this down into two. And within those two, there are lots of variations, but we have a point system and a no point system. Both of them rely on having an offer of employment in New Zealand or currently working in New Zealand, either one. And they also rely on I guess, a definition of the occupation. So what occupation are you doing? One of them utilizes a points-based system, the other one doesn't. So we'll talk through the one that doesn't, the no point system first, which is called the Skilled Migrant Residence Program. They're both kind of called the same thing, which makes it very confusing. So the best way to think of it is, excuse me, one is called the Skilled Residence Program, the other one is called the Skilled Migrant Category, or SMC6 for short. So the No Points program works on basically two separate pathways itself. So within this one category, we have two ways you can secure residence, but both of those ways are based on our green list. So the green list is a list of occupations that immigration have prepared that generally tend to be in very high demand, hard to fill. We kind of always need these people. And it's occupations like healthcare, education, engineering, IT, quite often the commonly thought of occupations that the world needs. And these people or individuals generally always have a way to migrate to one country or another. So within that green list, we split that up into two parts. So we have a tier 1, and those you can almost think of those as being the occupations in slightly higher demand. And then we have a tier 2, which are occupations that are in demand, but not quite as high. Each of those occupations has a requirement. So it might be a qualification requirement, a work experience requirement, a requirement to be registered in New Zealand, or a requirement to earn a particular salary, or a combination of any of those things. And so in order to qualify down this pathway, whether it be tier 1 or tier 2, you must have a job in that occupation. And that's really important because your job title might be the same as one of these green list occupations, but the description is what really counts. So it's about making sure that the duties of the job line up with the duties that immigration would consider to align with that job. So you have to have the job in the occupation, and you also have to meet the requirements, whether it be a degree or a diploma or work experience or salary, or be registered here. That's really, really important, and it's specific. So whatever the list requires, you must meet it specifically, exactly. So on tier 1, the tier 1 occupations can apply for what we refer to as straight to residence. So that means if you've got a job offer, whether you're here in New Zealand or somewhere else, and it's in that occupation and you meet the requirements of that occupation, you can apply directly for residence. You don't have to apply for a work visa if your employer is willing to wait, and they process fairly quickly. They do have a priority attached to them. The other pathway, tier 2, so if you're in a tier 2 occupation, you can apply for residence, but not right away. So you have to work in that occupation for a period of 2 years, and that will ultimately need a work visa allowing you to work. So when we looked at the previous slide, we have the two visa systems, temporary and residence, and this is how they connect. Because if you're a tier 2 applicant on the green list, you need to work here for 2 years before the residence application can be launched. So basically that means work visa first, then you work for 2 years, then you apply for residence. And in many cases, to get the job, you're going to need a visitor visa to come here find the job, then a work visa, then your residence. So it's a bit of a layered process, and often it's not just one visa, it's three that you need to think about. So the obvious advantages is straight to residence is a direct to residence pathway, and the work to residence or tier 2 takes a bit longer to achieve. You also need to factor in, even if you're a straight to residence applicant, that your application may not be processed straight away. While immigration prioritizes these cases, so they look at them first and they treat them with urgency, your situation might determine that it actually takes longer than a few weeks or a month or two. And there are all sorts of reasons for that. It could be health issues, it could be documents, it could be even just down to your nationality. Immigration undertakes different levels of verification based on where you're coming from. And so that could lead to your application taking longer than someone else's. And that might also mean you need to do the work visa. Even though you're a straight to residence applicant, you might have to contemplate a work visa in the middle. So if you're looking at this particular pathway, the most important things to think about are, one, do you meet the requirements for the green list? So do you have the particular qualifications or work experience or registration or the salary in New Zealand that the list requires? Number two, you also need to make sure that the job you have secured here is a match to that green list, and not just by way of a title, but by the duties that the job performs. And then some other basic rules: you must speak English. That is generally determined by a test. There are some exemptions, but they're quite limited. You need to be healthy, and you need to be of good character, and you need to be under 56 years of age when you lodge the application. So if you lodge this on your 55th year, 11th month, 3rd week, and 6th day, that's fine. If you turn 56 while it's being processed, no problem. You lodged before your age changed. So some basics, but yeah, really most important is to make sure you actually tick the list, or tick the requirements of that occupation on that list. Where a lot of people fall down in this process, and where some applications do get declined, is because people assume just because they've got the job, they tick the box with the green list and straight to residence or work to residence, but they've missed something. They might have missed the requirement to have a certain amount of work experience or a certain qualification that is recognized here. So establishing that up front will save you a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of hassle when you do go to apply. So that was the no point system. Now we talk about the point system, and the point system is a little bit more complicated. Certainly complicated if you look at that table on the screen, but it's actually a lot simpler than the point system used to be. So the one that we're looking at now was created in October, or was rather rolled out in October of 2023. So it's only very new. In fact, there's only a handful of applications have been submitted under this category so far. But it works on a 6 points model, so you need 6 points to qualify. The previous version of this, which was also called the Skilled Migrant Category, had 180 points pass mark. Prior to that, it was 160 and 140 and so forth. And it had a whole lot more points factors that you had to consider. So the old system was more complicated because there were more points to calculate, more points for immigration to verify, basically a lot more work to be done. This system is a lot easier for immigration to manage, and in reality, that's why they've done this. They've changed the system to simplify it for applicants, but also principally to make them a lot less complicated to process. So if you have an application that only really has 2 or 3 things to consider, it's a lot quicker to assess that than it is something with 15 or 16 things to consider. So how does it work? The 6 points is made up of, there are 2 tables, one big table, the small table. So basically you get points from one of the columns in the big table. You can't merge them, you can't double them up, you can only choose one. And then if you need to, you can top it up with points on the smaller table. So let's run through a quick example. If you're a doctor and a doctor requires 6 years of training to become registered in New Zealand, or to become registered anywhere really, then on that big table in the first column, you would tick that box at the top that says greater than or equal to 6 years of training to become New Zealand registered. That would give you 6 points. So basically a doctor with a job offer in New Zealand, under 55, speaks English, and we hope our doctors do speak English, healthy with no convictions or no significant character issues, would be able to apply under the point system straight away. Doctor's probably a tricky example because they could also apply under the straight to residence category. But if you were in an occupation that required 6 years of training to become registered, then you have a direct to residence pathway. Now, you might still need the work visa because these applications can take some time. They are not prioritised as the straight to residence category is, but you can apply for residence without really having to wait around. You get the job, you might get the work visa, then you might apply for residence straight away. And I would always recommend you do that, because you want to, if you qualify, take advantage of the rules while you qualify. They might change, you might miss the boat. So that's the first example. But what happens if you're not a doctor or not in a registered occupation? Maybe you have a bachelor's degree and you're an accountant. So an accountant doesn't occupy a place on our green list, but you don't have to be on the green list to go down the point system. So we look at that middle column in the big table and we say, well, that's a level 7 bachelor degree. That's worth 3 points. So halfway there. How do you get the other 6 points? Well, then you look at the smaller table, and that defines New Zealand skilled work experience. And so if you work in New Zealand for a period of 3 years, you will get 3 points. So now your 3 plus 3 equals 6. So what that means for the bachelor degree qualified accountant with a job as an accountant in New Zealand, you can now apply after 3 years working here. So this becomes a work to residence process. You essentially secure the job, secure the work visa, and that would be an accredited employer work visa, and that will lead you to residence after 3 years' time. And so there's the difference. Some people are going to be able to apply for residence straight away, some after a year, some after 2, and some after 3. Now, what if you don't have a registered occupation, so you're not a doctor, a dentist, or an electrician, and you don't have a specific degree, but you do have the ability to earn income here, so a decent amount of income. If that's the case, and depending on what that income is, you can potentially apply after 1, 2, or 3 years. If your income is really high, and that's 3 times the median income, so essentially that would be somewhere in the region of about $185,000 a year currently, you could qualify after, or straight away, because you'll get 6 points for that job. Doesn't matter what the job is, your salary will tick that box. And then if you earn 2 times the median, you get 4 points. So you're going to be able to apply after 2 years. And then 1.5 times the median is 3 points. You can apply after 3 years. So again, it's a work to residence or direct to residence path, depending on how many points you bring to the equation up front. And also, just the same way as the other category, it's about understanding whether or not your occupation will qualify. Now, really important, there is no green list for these occupations, but it has to be either skilled or paid a certain salary to be considered skilled. And so it's important to understand whether your background and your career and your experience are going to put you in the position of earning sufficient income to tick these boxes and to make this process happen. And so not all people can achieve that. You do have to consider whether or not your earning potential is high enough, whether you have the right qualification, whether that lines you up for the right kind of job here. Always important to do this sort of assessment before you make the move to New Zealand. And that's really what we do as a first step with an applicant or with a client, is to have a good look at what the options are, what the pitfalls might be, what the stumbling blocks could be, and what strategy we need to deploy in order to make this work. So having gone through, again, this is a brief summary of the details, but having talked through some of the key skilled policies, it's not just about the visa. So a lot of the time that I spend with my clients is spent on other things. It's spent on, talking about relocation and down to the logistics, the timing, the planning, shipping your goods, bringing your pets, all those sorts of things. And also, how do you settle in? How do you actually make the move? How do you integrate into New Zealand? What's really important? What you need to think about? And the fact that it won't be easy. It is a tough process, and that you will miss home. You'll be homesick. There's all those factors. But if you manage it right and you manage your expectations right, you'll be able to make this work. I also spend a lot of time talking to clients about how you find the job, because ultimately finding the job here is it's an important part. It's the kind of key to the visa process, but it's a challenging part. It's a really, really difficult process, particularly if you're offshore. And often my advice is that realistically, to find a job in New Zealand, you need to be in New Zealand. It kind of makes some sense. How you do that, though, strategically and in terms of the visas and the applications and the process is an entirely different equation, and something that needs really careful thought, but all very achievable. So my advice is be prepared from the very start to the very end. Being prepared is crucial, whether it's the documents you need, whether it's preparing your CV, whether it's understanding the labour market, the steps in the process. It's crucial to get a really good understanding of what's involved. But in the same breath, you can't prepare for everything. You also need to realize there are some changes along the way. There will be things that you need to adjust and adapt to, and being flexible enough to do that is really important. Second piece of advice, enjoy the adventure. It is a challenge. It's a really complicated, emotionally exhausting, financially draining, logistically challenging journey, but you've got to enjoy it as much as you can, because ultimately you're doing this for a number of reasons, and everyone has a different reason. But you've got to stay focused on what that reason is. And it might be the future for your children. It might be to pursue a better career opportunity, to get more open space, to be able to see the hobbits running around Auckland City. We don't have hobbits, by the way, but the challenge here is to kind of mix the difficult stuff and always remember to try and enjoy the fact that this is an exciting, rewarding adventure, and the end will always justify the means. Take the advice. So if you enlist someone like us or someone like myself to assist and to guide you through the process, rely on that advice, but make sure you have a good relationship with the person you're getting that advice from. But as an advisor, one of the really frustrating things is that there is a lot of information available now everywhere. And often that information is conflicting or contradictory. It's all very well intentioned. A lot of people will, try and give people advice to help them out, but often their advice is based on their situation, their process, and it doesn't really work for you. So if you enlist someone to help you and you trust that person and you've put your trust in that person, and selecting that person can be a bit of a challenge, but once you've done that, follow the advice, because a good plan, well laid out from the start, will save you so much time as you go through all of this. And lastly, be prepared for change. The visa process can be very fluid, and sometimes you have to adjust your plan and you have to be a bit flexible. All migrants would want the perfect scenario. They pack their bags this month, they get the job next month, they arrive in the country in the third month, and kids start school in the fourth month. The reality is it never works that way. It works when the job offer turns up. It works when you finally manage to get the visa approved. It works when you are here and you finally figured out how everything in New Zealand works. Don't expect it all to fall into place straight away. It will take some time, and that's okay. And then you will be homesick after 6-12 months. The first 6 months, it's fantastic, it's new, it's shiny, it's sparkly, it's wonderful. And then you start to get a bit homesick, and then you wonder why you did this. And then eventually you come out the other side understanding why you did this and that you did the right thing. So bear all of that in mind. This is a really complicated process, but a very worthwhile one. And lastly, nobody can convince you to make the move. It's your decision and it's yours alone. You have to be comfortable with it. And of course, you'll have lots of friends and family encouraging you, and that's great. But you have to be the one that sort of makes that final decision to jump into this and to commit to this process. So I'm going to turn the video back on very quickly. So, having listened to this, and if you are interested in moving ahead or just finding out more in terms of how it all works and whether you qualify, we can offer you a one-to-one consultation via Zoom or Teams, which essentially is us discussing your eligibility, laying out a bit of a roadmap for you, and giving you kind of the facts and figures to make this work. What will it cost? How long will it take? What do you need to do? And I often work to a very simple 4-step plan that works on being prepared, how you undertake the job search, applying for the temporary visas if they're needed, and then eventually residence. We go through all your options, we assess you against all the visa categories, and we kind of map out the best way forward based on years of experience in doing this. They last for about 60 to 90 minutes. I don't really put a time limit on it though, because if you've got questions, we hopefully will have the answers. We obtain information from you online first so that we can spend the time with you doing the actual consultation as opposed to asking too many questions. If you're interested in booking that, you can visit our website. We have our contact details there. It's very simple. Get in touch and we'll talk you through it. And if you are interested or looking to make this big, bold move to another country, fantastic, good on you. This is a first step, and it's all about first steps. So if you take it, hopefully you take that first step with us, and we look forward to speaking with you at some point in the future. Thank you.